Africa figured prominently in the recently concluded G7 meeting. Host Italy waxed eloquently on the theme, threat from artificial intelligence, and discussed a strategy to subordinate AI's use for human emancipation. But beyond the veneer of semantics, there was an intrusive agenda. trendsNafrica and Africa for You in its editorial for June 16, 2024 dwells on the stated and unstated objectives of the G7 and how the African continent stands to be a stakeholder from the evolving architecture. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni reached out to leaders from several African countries, Argentina, Brazil, and India. This expanded outreach, particularly on Africa, was to bridge the West versus the rest gap and build consensus on global issues. Importantly, the host, Italy, also had its agenda overarching that of G7. Africa had become a central plank of Meloni's foreign policy since she took office in late 2022. She named the Africa policy as Mattei Plan, after Eni's, largest Italian corporation having massive investments in the continent, particularly in northern Africa, founder Enrico Mattei. Through the construction of the new pipeline, the TransMed, popularly known as Enrico Mattei Pipeline, which carries Algerian gas to Italy via Tunisia, Italy will get greater strategic importance. It will become an exporter of both natural gas and hydrogen to countries such as Germany and Austria, and the gateway linking North Africa to Central and Northern European countries. Political analysts opine that Meloni's African policy has both stated and unstated objectives. Stated policy, as evidenced by the number of trips that she had undertaken, especially to Northern Africa, is to make Italy the closest ally of Africa during the energy transition and to ensure economic activities snowballed to the rest of West Europe only through its intermediation. The unstated objective is to reverse the migrant flow from Africa into Europe, where all countries are at the receiving end. The G7 summit this year in Italy made some significant announcements. Energy for Growth Initiative in Africa was a visible effort to help Africa develop bankable clean energy projects, attract public-private partnerships, encourage the flow of concessional finance, and overcome barriers to investments in clean energy across Africa. G7 is also striving to provide an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects are proposed across Africa, including the Lobito Corridor, with significant financial backing from the African Development Bank and G7 nations. Italy and the United States will collaborate on clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and e-mobility projects in Kenya. To gain more insights on what is in store for Africa in the recently concluded G7 meeting, read our recent editorial and other seminal reports and reportage on G7. We are your gateway to expanding business opportunities in Africa.